The All Progressive Congress has zoned the Senate presidency to the South-South geopolitical zone, with former Akpabio State Governor Akpabio named as a preferred consensus candidate. The position of the Speaker of the House of Representatives was zoned to the Northwest geopolitical zone, with Tajuddin Abbas from Kaduna State announced as the preferred consensus candidate. The zoning arrangement for the offices of the 10th National Assembly was announced by the APC National Publicity Secretary, Felix Morka, after 3 hours of meeting with the National Working Committee at the party secretariat in Abuja. The position of the Deputy Senate President was zoned to the Northwest region, with Senator Abral Jibrin from Kano State announced as a preferred consensus candidate, while the position of Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives was zoned to the Southeast region, with Benjamin Kalu of Abia State as a preferred consensus candidate of the party.
The NWC noted with respect the outcome of the meetings held between the President-elect and the leadership of the NWC. The NWC called for further and better consultation with necessary stakeholders in order to assure the support of the aspirants to the National Assembly leadership positions and members of the party nationwide. The zoning arrangement reported to the NWC is as follows. Senate 1. Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, Kaduna. For Deputy Speaker, Southeast, Honorable Ben Kalu, Abia. We urge our party leaders, members, and all Nigerians to continue to work for the peace and progress of our country during and beyond the current period of leadership transition.
A lot to talk about, Ayo.
Well, yes, finally, the APC National Working Committee has come out very boldly, as we've seen in that video, as to their consensus deal and the outcome of their meeting yesterday. I think it's important to mention that it's not a whore. This is their position, but at the end of the day, the responsibility of the election of presiding officers in the 10th Assembly will be the preserve of the elected senators and House of Representatives members. But as we've seen in previous times, parties can come together, have a meeting, and decide which direction they will go. And there are many reasons for this. I mean, in this instance, in the spirit, what they've described as the spirit of fairness and equity, so that they're able to ensure that different zones, political zones in Nigeria are represented, they've decided to come together as a party to decide on who or on which direction they'll be going to. Some people have described this as a template that was developed by the President-elect and adopted by the National Working Committee. But what we see now in terms of the breakdown of zones of the principal officers of the next administration is Southwest as President, we have Northeast as Vice President. Now, if this goes through, we would have South-South as Senate President. As Speaker of the House, you'll have the North-West, and of course, Deputy Senate President Northwest, and Deputy Speaker would be Southeast. Now, the challenge here, as I'm sure you would begin to see some things, is that, number one, the North Central isn't represented. Perhaps the justification for that would be that the chairman of the party is from that zone, so that sort of covers that area. However, some stakeholders under the aegis of the North Central stakeholders are not agreeing to this particular recommendation by the National Working Committee. They're saying it is unfair, despite the significant role that the North Central played in having the emergence of the APC as winners during the last elections, that they ought to be more represented. There are many factors that would play out in the next few days, and perhaps might we see a more intriguing and dramatic election process than we saw during the 8th Assembly, where we had a coalition between the APC and the PDP, with an APC Senate President emerging and the PDP as deputy. Would we see the power of the main opposition parties who've come together under their own umbrella, especially in terms of determining the Speaker of the House of Representatives? Because in this particular instance, the APC does not have majority seats in the lower house. Therefore, if the opposition parties can come together, and it's a big if, come together united, they've set up an 11-man committee to begin to determine, vet the possible Speaker of the House of Representatives, then they just might, upset the plans of the APC. More than ever, because of how tightly close the numbers are. In the Senate, APC has 50 seats. The opposition parties put together have 57. The main opposition party, PDP, has 36. If they don't get their house together and there's division amongst them, they just might play into the hands of the opposition, because they have a simple majority, but not significant enough to not have that effect if they don't come together in unity. I say this because a senator from the Southeast, Senator Jules Okalu, has written to 108 members of the Senate to express his intentions, despite the fact that the National Working Committee has come out with these results. Would that divide the votes? Recall again, if there are lessons to learn from the elections, the division of the votes following the PDP, Labour Party, NNPP, and how that affected what would have been the main opposition party, the PDP, during the elections. Would we see that play out? For the best of the party, and if the party wants to hold that seat in terms of the Senate, they must ensure that they are able to appease all parties involved. How this will happen will play out in the coming days, because it doesn't seem like Senator Jules Okalu is willing to let go of his ambitions, at least at this moment, of being the next Senate President of Nigeria.
Okay, whatever is happening at the moment should not be surprising. After all, in January this year, we saw in the Congress of the United States all that back and forth about the emergence of House of Reps Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He had to even make concessions. The hard right, the far right within the Republican Party, saying, oh, look, we have to make concessions before you can become Speaker. So it's part of parliamentary business to have all these horse trading, filibustering across the eyes and all of that. However, the difference is that the people who cite the example of other jurisdictions should be reminded by the fact that at the end of the day, it's still on the floor of the parliament. The real problem here, as I pointed out yesterday, is that in Nigeria, appointing the leadership of the National Assembly has always been an occasion for a conflict between legislative independence and party supremacy. At the risk of repeating myself, Section 50 of the 1999 Constitution says that the lawmakers in Nigeria shall choose from among themselves. But the party always tries to say, no, we're a party. Our Constitution says we must have a voice in the matter. And that is precisely what the APC, the All Progressives Congress, is trying to do in this particular instance. And what they've done yesterday, as stated clearly in the statement by Felix Moka, spokesperson of the party, is that they've now decided that Tajuddin Abbas will be Speaker of the House of Representatives, and Godswill Akpabio will be President of the Senate. Other positions have been similarly zoned out and shared out, with a caveat, with a footnote, that this is what the president-elect wants. So should it be what the president-elect wants? Should it be what the party wants? Yesterday, I made a point that we have seen crisis in this respect. In 1999, when President Obasanjo, even as president-elect, wanted to put his own persons in charge of the legislature, a body that is supposed to be independent. I narrated what happened thereafter. Okay, in 1979, the MPN also decided on who will be Senate President, who will be Speaker. So it's almost natural for political parties to say, this is who we want. But the key point, at the risk again of repeating myself, some of the things I said yesterday, is that Nigeria at the moment is at a crossroads. Nigeria cannot afford a rubber stamp National Assembly. We cannot afford to have in Aso Villa a president who is also at the same time the Babakekpe, the leader of the National Assembly. We have seen the effect of rubber stamp National Assembly. Anything the president wants is what we will do. There are very serious issues to be considered. And the people who are in the National Assembly must be placed in a position where they can use their brain. Otherwise, we will have more people sleeping in that place. We don't want people who go to the National Assembly to go and doze off because they know that it doesn't matter anyway. Whatever the executive brings, we will rubber stamp, because it's the executive that has put the leadership there. The other side of it is that there are 68 other National Assembly members across party lines who are saying you cannot dictate to us. And so when that National Assembly is convened, are we going to have a 2015 situation whereby the National Assembly members decided on their own what they wanted? Well, we all had to pay the price for the consequences of that decision. We also have people from the North Central saying, no, in the House of Reps, we will produce from North Central the Speaker. So what we're looking at is a prospect of conflict between the executive and the legislature. It's a prospect of a divided 10th National Assembly of Nigeria. On top of it all, I think that the All Progressives Congress and the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be properly advised to focus on the larger objective of making laws for the good governance of Nigeria, of respecting the separation of powers, and making sure that with all these problems that we have, inflation riding on the back of a horse, galloping, away from us, unemployment, rising before our very eyes, foreign exchange crisis, ways and means crisis. All of these issues are more important issues than the individual ambition of those who think that certain positions, certain powerful positions belong to them. It's a beginning point for APC, also for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to show wisdom and show leadership and ensure that we are not saddled with a 10th National Assembly that will be wrangling. The man who said the Senate President is a proper fit for his Igbere village and for his family and for his state has already written a petition. That's Senator Ojus Okalu, to say that no, he's still in the race. Others say they are in the race. Please, can all these people just remember that they are there as representatives of Nigerians too, and that their primary assignment cannot be to go and do a battle royale about their personal ambitions. That's not what the Nigerian people want. And the Nigerian people have a responsibility to speak up and say what we want is good governance. Good governance does not include the primordial, primitive conflicts among lawmakers and an incoming presidential villa trying to pull the strings.
Nigerians, we major in the minor. We know how to deceive ourselves. In fact, we have A1 in self-deceit. We know why all of this is happening. Why have all of this always happened historically? Because we have an executive that is so strong. In effect, we're supposed to have 3 arms of government: executive, legislative, judiciary. But we have an executive that is so strong that have put the judiciary under its armpits, legislative under its armpits. Until recently, and kudos to President Buhari for that, for upholding financial autonomy in the judiciary. The judiciary was pretty much under the armpit of the executive, and that's why you see what happened last week, that a state governor is the one building a judiciary complex. Which judge wants to rule against him? The second part, they will quote party supremacy. And in the interest of that, they're trying to put the legislative under their armpit. You see, if we want to run a sane government, they must be co-equal arms of government. And if they are co-equal arms, the party should not make input on how the legislative gets its own principal officers. They should allow them do their thing. But they say it's for the furtherance of the government. Yes, the furtherance of the government, but also because you want the government to be able to evade levels of accountability. Hence the word rubber stamp comes in. And why is everybody fighting for principal position? And some are saying they are supporting them. Because they know most of the lawmakers that are going in there, they want juicy committees. So if you support your candidate and he becomes speaker or he becomes Senate president, he will definitely influence getting you in juicy committees where people can make money through oversight roles. And when they say they are going to visit all these companies, they get something in return and all of that. So you see, the grand scale of all of this is still corruption and self and personal benefit. Until we have a National Assembly that works for people, we'll not have a good country. And how do we make the National Assembly work for people? De-emphasize money in politics. Make all of these National Assemblies people part-time workers. Only pay them for sitting. Do not pay them big fat salaries. Just only pay them for sitting allowance. And you see that the people that truly want to serve want to serve. A bunch of them out there are for their own personal interests and self-aggrandizement. And that's why you see it is only in Nigeria people take loans to do politics. With this, their zoning arrangement, they've automatically kicked aside the Southeast. They will make the argument that, oh, the Southeast, in Obasanjo's time was given Senate President and all of that. But look at the South-South that's been given the position of Senate President. Look at what is happening. This same South-South that was given the position of Deputy Senate President in the last dispensation, now they've got Senate President. The Southeast that agitated, they've got nothing. And I'm sure that the same governors, the Southeast governors that left and they say, oh, APC will do us justice. At first they said APC was going to give them Southeast presidency. They didn't get. Now, APC at least will look at us in terms of principal officers. Now they are not looking their way. So I'm sure those governors that decamp to APC from the Southeast, I think they are going to have a rethink and look at it, because in the end, Southeast doesn't get anything. Just like the North Central is clamoring. And we also stand a chance. But the Northwest keeps saying that we provided 2.7 million votes to the incumbent. We are 26% of the National Assembly. We have 92 seats. Oh, we should be able to get our way. But you see, one thing is certain. Every generation determines its own destiny. Those in the National Assembly have a chance to determine their own destiny. I was shocked when I saw Jose Okalu yesterday granting a joint press conference with Ifeanyi Ubah from the YPP, and they were talking about the need for Southeast leadership in the Senate. Probably they might be able to do a deal. Those that don't align with the APC position might be able to do a deal with the opposition party and see how they can act their way through. I don't know. It could be a game of interest. But one thing is certain. There's a big danger if we don't have co-equal arms of government. If the National Assembly is rubber stamp, it's problematic. Then we start to make faulty decisions like we made with Ways and Means, where the National Assembly, the legislature of the country, deliberately in cahoots with the federal government, the executive, broke a law that was ratified by the legislature and the executive and signed into law by the executive, and that's the CBN Act. So that's the kind of country we build when we don't have a country of transparency, honesty, and integrity. And this is going to continue, because most of the people there are for their own selfish interests in the end, after all is said and done. Looking forward to a Nigeria where we're going to have truly independent, co-equal arms of government. It's only there we can effectively settle out the problems that are hitherto bedeviling the prospect and the prosperity of this country. This country will rise until when we are ready. The Presidential Election Petition Tribunal has begun hearing petitions by several opposition candidates challenging Bola Tinubu's victory. It is the start of a case that could offer high-stakes drama, with the Action Alliance withdrawing its petition and court adjourning Peter Obi's petition to Wednesday. The PDP's Atiku Abubakar is also seeking live broadcasts of the court proceedings. Arise correspondent Jeffrey Ashamagai reports.
Security was beefed up at the headquarters of the Court of Appeal, which is the Presidential Election Petition Court, as nearby road intersections were cut off to traffic to ward off potential threat to security. Thorough checks were carried out on all vehicles that accessed the premises. The court was packed full with senior advocates and other lawyers fully present to represent their clients. Justice Haruna Tamani, in his welcome speech, urged counsels to shun all conduct that could amount to avoidable waste of time of the court, while pleading for maximum cooperation as he assures of commitment to hear and determine all petitions on their merit. The first activity of the 5-member panel was to strike out the petition of the Action Alliance, AA, after its withdrawal. Factional chairman of the party, Adikule Rufai, said the petition was against INEC's mode of conduct of the polls and not against Tinubu's victory, and that the proposed policies of the president-elect resonate with what the party leadership holds dear.
This petition was in the main an attempt to bring INEC back to appreciate that no matter how powerful they are, they cannot disobey court orders. About 8 judgments told INEC that this man standing beside me is the national chairman of the party and not any other person. 2 federal high courts told INEC that they must deal with the list he submits and upload them as candidates in the election. INEC ignored all the orders, including the orders of the Court of Appeal, which said the man you are dealing with is not even a member of the party.
One of the reasons advanced by some of our leaders as well is the belief in the ability of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, being a proponent of restructuring, which has been one major reason why we have the barrage of agitation in our land today. We evolved a kind of policy that could engender resurgence of trust in our togetherness as a national entity. Truth be told, our country, Nigeria today, is at the precipice. We need a personality that believes in policies that can repose trust in the aggrieved indigenous nationalities.
Following that, there were pre-hearing sessions for the Action People's Party, APP, which says it will not withdraw its petition, and that by Peter Obi's Labour Party, with the court fixing Wednesday 10th May for continuation. The pre-hearing for the People's Democratic Party, PDP, holds Tuesday.
I am a lawyer. I have the consent of my clients, however it is. So if going forward they give me an instruction, I will take the instruction. But as of today, we are going on and we are strongly coming back on the 10th of May. That's Wednesday, for the continuation of the pre-hearing session.
One way or the other, I do not think that it will be business as usual as far as Nigeria's electoral jurisprudence is concerned. And we have assured the court that we will do all that we can to ensure that these petitions are heard expeditiously.
On our part, all the lawyers for all the parties also committed themselves to cooperating with the tribunal, the court, to make sure that these matters are dealt with urgently because of their national importance. So we are very happy today 3 petitions have been dealt with and 2 to come up tomorrow, and the very important ones, Atiku and PDP petition will be coming up.
The pre-hearing session for the Allied People's Movement, APM, also holds on Tuesday as the Presidential Election Petition Court tidies up the documents before it as it gets clarity on the number of witnesses and exhibits that will be tendered for the petition proceedings when it gets fully underway. Godfrey Eshemoge, Arise News.
Let's talk about it.
And so it begins. Well, there are a lot we'll talk about when the actual hearing actually begins. This is a pre-hearing, which is a legal ritual to set, as we saw, a few, just to begin and to pre-hear the cases from each of the parties. Now, some of the highlights of what happened yesterday, this much-awaited presidential election petition tribunal presided by the presiding justice of the Abuja Appeal Court, Justice Haruna Samani, whose name will perhaps become very popular in the next coming days. It's a team of 5 justices, and they'd be the ones to oversee the cases. As we saw there, the AA had withdrawn their petition and the court had subsequently struck it out as well. And what they cited was that it was for unity of the nation. In his speech, the chairman of a faction of the party had said that they didn't want what had happened in June 12. What they were really against was how INEC conducted the elections, not necessarily contesting the fact that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu won the election. So that was one part of it, making it down to now 4 parties join, in the suit. We have the Labour Party, we have the AA, And then we have the PDP and the APM. And then, of course, defending would be the APC. We saw the show of the best, some of the best legal minds in Nigeria representing some of these parties. One thing I must note is what the opening statement of the justice of the judge, who said that he wouldn't entertain time-wasting technicalities. He wanted, the process to be as judicious as possible, in terms of justice being served. And this is what Nigerians are looking forward to. All eyes now on the judiciary, literally. We haven't heard yet whether they would grant the prayers of the PDP to televise the procedure. However, what Nigerians will be keenly watching is to see just how well the justices will handle the cases. What we're looking forward to is that justice is served. At the end of the day, the belief is that Nigerians would be better, able to accept the outcome of the results if they see that it's not thrown out based on technicalities, that indeed the merit of the case is what is truly judged, and that at the end of the day, the best or the one who is supposed to win is the one that emerges as winner. But as I mentioned, this is just pre-hearing. We'll get to the actual hearings in the next few days.
Well, the A is already out of the case. Left in the case is the APP, the LP, the Labour Party, the APM, and the PDP. Nobody should be surprised if before, the matter continues, other political parties also decide to withdraw and say, they will no longer follow through with their petition. The Action Alliance, of course, the key issue is that the party is factionalized. The two parties asking for the same thing. The court was left with no option but to say, well, since both of you are asking for the same thing, you might as well just withdraw your suit and get out of the arena. But I think the more important issues is that, that panel of 5 justices, led by Justice Samani, made a point appealing to the bar not to come up with all kinds of frivolous excuses to delay the matter. And it was good that all the lead counsel also stood up and said, well, we will cooperate with the court. But because the biggest problem with judicial process in Nigeria is the funny conduct of counsel, who are themselves supposed to be officers in the temple of justice. So that's big reassurance. But we'll see whether the lawyers will play according to the rule or they would find ways to delay the process. The second point made by Justice Samani is that he promised that the court will be fair to all. That's also very important because indeed all eyes are on the judiciary. The integrity of the judiciary has been called to question by those persons saying, go to court, as if they have a premeditated idea of the outcome in the courts of law of the land. So their lordships have a responsibility to ensure, indeed, as they have promised, that justice is done. That, again, is very important. The third point has to do with the request for live broadcast by the PDP. Well, the court will inquire into that and take a decision. It will be the first time that we'll have televised, broadcasting of court proceedings. And many learned persons have said, look, this is not an issue. The whole idea by the PDP and Atiku Abubakar pushing for that is to inspire confidence in the process and trust in the process, okay? But however, what nobody has talked about is the issue of cost. The TV stations and the radio stations that will broadcast and televise live, they will be a cost. 1 hour broadcast of proceedings, 2 hours broadcast of proceedings. There are implications. Who is going to pick up that cost? Who is going to pay for it? Well, I have my own ideas, but I don't want to push in that direction so that my contribution will not be considered masturbatory. But there is also cost involved. But in terms of public interest, yeah, it may be a good idea for all of us to monitor what goes on, in that presidential election petition tribunal. However, in spite of all of this, I have argued that whatever happens, and without prejudice to whatever happens, it looks like the stage is already set for inauguration on May 29th. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, once he's inaugurated, he is already acting presidential. After all, in Port Harcourt the other day, they declared 2 days holiday. He has moved into Defense House. He is already acting presidential. The residual point that Nigerians will have to deal with is, should we, indeed can we, determine election petitions before anybody is sworn in? Because once you are sworn in, you are given the presidential sash. Sometimes it may be really difficult, to see the process through, which is what past experience in this process tells us. But we'll see whether the courts will be radical or the courts will function along the lines of public policy. Public policy is different from the technicalities of law.
Okay, so one thing is certain. Finally, we're here. Go to court, go to court, go to court. Court is the hope of the common man, the last resort. We're in court. Everybody's in court. Nigeria is in court. Those that have won are in court. Those that didn't win are in court. Everybody will get their cases heard up. You've got 5 justices there. They'll sit to be able to look at the case in the Court of Appeal. And when people still feel disgruntled, so they have a right to go to the Supreme Court. This has always been the hallmark of our judicial process. To a large extent, the elections were highly contested, and there were lots of discrepancies. We shouldn't deceive ourselves with what happened as regards the IRF portal, the insecurity, and a lot that happened during the election. And that's on the basis of this, people and political parties are challenging. For the future, I think to be able to deepen democratic tenets, we should look at concluding electoral cases before swearing in happens. And you see, in recent times, we've seen the very, very virulent attacks on the likes of Bishop Onayekon, which is not needed. Because the clergyman just stated what was recommended in the Uwais panel report. And I think people should go back and read that report. President Umar Musa Yar'Adua came in. He said he knew there were challenges with the elections. He set up a Uwais panel report. Job was concluded before 2010. Those were the things that were recommended. So if we're true to the democratic tenets, we can actually conclude election petition before swearing in. If we want to do something in this country, we can do it. If we don't want to do it, we bring in sentiment and antics. That's number one. Number two, yes, it's pre-trial stage. Cases will be heard out. We also what happened to the AA. That was pretty much pre-election matter, internal party squabble, factionalization, and all of that. But the substantive cases, I would like to see how forensics will be used to empirically analyze results. And this is going to be the first elections where we're going to see the need for a server. Because in the last presidential petition tribunal, which I had the privilege, in fact, those were my early days in Arise, which I had the privilege to cover here, and that long ruling read out in 2019. The problem was the fact that there was no recognition of a server in the law. So this is the first time the law recognized the server. We will see the interplay of the server. Amazon Web Services will be heavily mentioned, and all the forensics and, technicalities and technological technicalities. So we'll see how all of that plays out. And we'd like to see all the good arguments. And, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar said it should be beam live. It should be beam live. The state broadcaster NTA can take up the cost. At least we all, saw how we all beamed live for Puta panel while it lasted in the country. And other people can take fees from them. They can take up the cost for the sake of national interest. And I'm sure every media house would like to cover it because this is going to give them eyeballs. What do media houses need? They need eyeballs to be able to sell to advertisers. Any radio or TV station showing the proceedings can sell advert slots at that time and make a lot of money because it's going to be a lot of eyeballs. And it's going to be one of the most watched television programs if the court finally accepts, that. So as regards that, and hey, we beamed the judgment that lasted over 4 hours in 2019 live on Arise TV here. And this was one of my first major coverage when I got here. So I don't see any reason why we should not be able to beam this, because the people have a right to know. And let this begin. And please, after all is said and done, after the case goes to Supreme Court, we must respect the ruling of the court and most importantly, think of how to build a strong nation. That's what will happen. We will fight, we'll disagree. But you see, we disagree because we all love the country and we have different ideas. Most important thing is we must never throw the baby away with the bathwater. Nigeria must not go down the drain, and we must see how we can uphold our country and move on.